2014, bringing news of rising enlightenment, invincibility, and peace, and the application of total knowledge in all fields of life and all parts of the world. Today, we bring news of rising invincibility in invincible Canada. A year ago, our Canadian governors created a strategic business plan to help achieve the goals of the Canadian movement. They prioritized these goals, starting with increasing initiations, instructions in transcendental meditation, strengthening the teachers, their ability to give convincing lectures to distinguish between transcendental meditation and other techniques with research on brain integration, opening new TM centers in the major cities, strengthening the follow-up programs to keep the meditators coming back and enjoying their meditation, and also bringing new referrals to learn meditation, opening regional residence course facilities, and establishing a new national capital for Canada. From August 13th to October 21st, it's been a great joy to be on a tour of Canada to see the progress in fulfilling these goals. In our report tonight, we'll follow the path of the tour and see this progress in each area of Canada. We'll begin where the tour began, at our national course facility in Huntsville, Canada, Lake of Bays, Ontario, with our Canadian National Director, Dr. William Overall. Please go ahead, Dr. Overall.
Jay Gurdev, thank you very much for this family chat today, and thank you so much for coming to Canada and touring with us across the country. And this August, we had our national governors workshops that began in middle of August. And the first group that came were the French governors, mostly from Quebec. We had 16 governors attend the workshop with Dr. Paul Gaudry, who focused on how to improve the brain coherence and showing it through EEG machines. And the second group that came was the English group. We had 35 governors come to the workshops in Huntsville. And again, we had a very successful training session with Dr. Paul Gaudry. Everybody was very inspired and felt reinvigorated and had more ability to go back and teach, given the information that they had gained from Dr. Gaudry about how the EEG can demonstrate the coherence from brainwave coherence that we have when we transcend. So we're very fortunate, and it was really great that you were there for both these workshops, Raja Paul, and I'd like to know from you what you felt having been a part of both the groups.
Well, thank you, Dr. Overall. I thought that the teachers gained confidence to be able to distinguish between TM and other techniques. That's so important now because so many other things are on the market which are less expensive, and nothing, of course, has anything to do with transcending, so we have to distinguish ourselves. And it's so good that Dr. Gaudry showed us how to do it. And we're going to hear now from one of our leading governors from Vancouver, Rich Van Schaik, who is attending the seminar. He is an expert on EEG, and he gave a beautiful presentation about Gaudry's course in our Vancouver celebration on our tour. So I'd like to ask Rich now, please go ahead and tell us something about this seminar that you took and what you learned from it and what the benefits are. Please go ahead, Rich Van Schaik.
Thank you, Roger Paul. If we could show the first slide. I must say that it was a wonderful presentation that Dr. Gaudry offered to us. Here we have a slide with all of the participants of the assembly. Right next to one of the most silent movement facilities I've ever experienced, right on the Lake of Bays, pure silence, wonderful programs, and enlightened learning by Dr. Guy-Paul Gagne, who I consider a rising star in the medical family within the movement. All right, we'll have the next slide. Thank you. Dr. Guy-Paul Gagne showed us the amazing connections that were possible within the brain. In fact, he told us that there are more connections, there are more neurons in the brain than there are leaves in the Amazon jungle. So it's a very rich series of connections that we can build. And that's what we do with transcendental meditation. Next slide. First of all, I'd like to look at some of the work that he showed us. Here we can see what goes on with sleep deprivation vis-a-vis actually being rested. So we can see how important it is to meditate. And as we can see in the bottom part of that slide, in the prefrontal cortex, which is up at the top of the ovals, that shows how the prefrontal cortex is enlivened in those yellow areas. That prefrontal cortex enlivenment only happens when the person is rested. Now we can go to the next slide. Now, Guy-Paul showed us additionally what happens with a normal and a depressed brain. So in the normal brain, there are a lot of connections between the thalamus, the central area, and the prefrontal cortex. In the depressed brain, the number of connections is vastly reduced. So we all know that TM enhances that connection to the prefrontal cortex. So here we see, these are not cartoons, these are actually brain mappings. We see how important it is for us to be completely connected between our prefrontal cortex and other regions of the brain. Next slide, please. Now, on this slide, what Guy-Paul showed us was if we look at the thalamus area, which is on the lower set of slides, the lower left slide, we see the thalamus area heated up, all right? What happens during TM is on the lower right slide, and that whole region is cooled down. So it's important that we know that TM actually produces important changes in the entire brain, not just in the cortex area, but deep within the brain as well. And on the next slide, we're going to see what happens within a different meditation technique. We can see in Buddhist meditation that that thalamus area during meditation is the same as during the baseline. And if we look at the next slide, I'm sorry, if we look at the previous slide, we see how TM reduces that thalamic activity. So it's very different. The TM is very different, for instance, from Buddhist meditation. Now, if we move on to the next slide, that shows what goes on in Vipassana, mindfulness meditation. If we look at the prefrontal cortex there, we see some yellowish regions, which shows some activity on the left figure there. We see some yellowish region, which shows there's more activity in the prefrontal cortex area. And this is associated with a reduction in anxiety, as we can see there. And the effect size is 0.24. So if we can recall this as we move on to the very next slide. On the next slide, we see the same region with TM. So we see that red region, which indicates a much richer area of activity. And in terms of anxiety, the reduction in anxiety produces an effect size of something like 0.86 or something like that, much, much greater than the effect size of the anxiety reduction of anxiety. And we can also see that central region of the brain in the blue calmer area. So that central region of the brain is calmed down. So TM, again, is producing changes throughout the brain. And it was very wonderful for Paul to actually show us all of this research in a very enlightened and blissful way. In fact, he even told us how the changes manifest.
Thank you, Rich. That was very, very inspiring to hear from you about the course that Dr. Gagne gave to all of our French-speaking and English-speaking governors throughout Canada on the Governor's Assembly in Huntsville. So many other things were happening while we were there. After the Huntsville Governor's Assembly, there was a one-week course on Ayurveda, and so many different technologies were being offered there. Some panchakarma, the Ayurveda consultations, advanced techniques. You could go back, please, one slide. Advanced techniques, and so many different technologies were offered. It was just wonderful. And we've been having one-week webinars, advanced knowledge that's been going out to all of the centers simultaneously every Sunday on a webinar. And the meditators have been coming to the centers and the teachers have been offering. And we had one with Charlie Heath on Jyotish, one with Vajravaja on Maharishi Ayurveda. And following that, there was a one-week course at Huntsville. Many people who saw the webinar got inspired and came for a one-week course. So we're really expanding the follow-up program quickly. Next summer, we have a special course with Dr. Evan Finkelstein on higher states of consciousness and the religious traditions of the world. So we invite everyone to come from the 4th to 11th of July next summer, and many more of these one-week courses now are being scheduled. It's a beautiful experience that Canadians are having now of advanced knowledge at Huntsville. And the renovations at Huntsville have gone on to make it really comfortable there now. We'll be having another year of courses there. I wanted to congratulate the French governors who completed the course with Guy Paul in Huntsville. They went on to give a great inspiration to all of the meditators in Quebec at a celebration that we had in Quebec shortly after the course. If video would like to show a short video now from that celebration, it'll be very interesting to see. We'll be hearing in the video from John Sirigo, the senior teacher in Montreal, from Eric Simon, from Philippe Ramsey, from Dennis Cochin, Louis Charlebois, and Francine Leclerc, all who went to the Huntsville course with Guy Paul and who are now in this video inspiring their family of meditators in Quebec. So please video show this wonderful celebration.
Puis Sadek qui va rester pendant quelques jours à Montréal et après partir à d'autres parties du Canada. Alors, on l'accueille chaleureusement.
Jay Gurudev. Me fait très grand plaisir d'être ici avec vous en Québec, à Montréal. Moi, j'aime beaucoup le Québec parce que Québec, c'est une province de joie.
Et qui permettent aussi de distinguer, comme Rajapal l'a mentionné, entre l'AMT et les autres formes de méditation. Alors ça, c'est un sujet un peu long, là. Je ne pourrais pas vous passer à travers de tous ces aspects-là, Mais comme Rajapal l'a expliqué, ce qu'on a utilisé, en fait, j'ai utilisé des connaissances médicales que j'ai, qui m'ont toujours servi un peu pendant toute ma carrière, donc non seulement pour faire mon travail, mais pour comprendre de plus en plus ce que Maharishi enseignait.
Les choses sont là avant. Ça veut dire vraiment les désirs de Rajapal, c'est pour avoir un Canada, un Québec invincible. Et ça, c'est son rôle que Maharishi a lui donné. Et on voit que maintenant, partout au Canada, si c'est Toronto, Ottawa, Calgary, Vancouver, Huntsville, avec l'attention de Rajapal, tout s'épanouit. Et j'ai juste appelé Jay Goodell.
Philippe est le CFO du Mouvement Canada. Et il fait un projet pour tout le Canada très intelligent et très business.
Alors, Philippe Ramsey, je suis nouvellement employé du Global Country of World Peace, l'organisation nationale qui regroupe le mouvement ici au Canada.
Une autre organisation, une organisation plus charitable, vient appuyer le fait que les gens puissent commencer à méditer. À ce moment-là, on peut jouer sur la perception dans le public, etc., et avoir une perception plus positive dans le public. Voilà. C'est ce que
de notre organe extraordinaire de la vie nous a donné. Et ce que j'en ai conclu, ce à quoi ça m'a invité, c'est la nécessité qu'à peu près tout le monde puisse au moins en savoir le plus possible sur...
Bonjour, Gaudry. C'est juste pour vous dire, c'est comme Maharishi dit toujours, la connaissance est structurée dans la conscience. Bien là, la conscience, elle s'ouvre, puis on a de plus en plus de connaissances qui se structurent dans notre conscience. Ça veut dire qu'il faut être fier d'être méditant, puis qu'on en parle aux gens. Fait comme ça, ça va juste allumer.
Thank you. Inspiration to see how the governors came back from that course so full of enthusiasm, and how the whole of Quebec is taking off now with a new dynamism and expansion as Dr. Guy-Paul Gagné is continuing to work with the governors there on their presentations, distinguishing between TM and other techniques, and also now going to be giving public presentations to all areas of society. I'd like now to welcome our senior teacher in Montreal, John Sirigo, to comment further. Please go ahead, John Sirigo.
Thank you, Rajapal. It's a great joy to address our global family about all the goings-on and happenings here in French Canada, Montreal and Quebec City and Three Rivers and Sherbrooke. For those of you who saw that short video, it's been a tradition with Rajapal, whenever he comes to French Canada, to Montreal especially, that he likes to get the family of governors, siddhas, and meditators together. So we were asked to organize for that, and that's what you just saw a couple minutes back. And I can't tell you what a wave of inspiration for all the meditators and siddhas who were there, especially hearing everything that Dr. Guy-Paul Gagné had to say, which was basically a continuation of what he did in Fairfield, but in a much shorter form. Now, Rajapal, during his stay here in Montreal, was at a hotel, and he graciously invited us all, and what you see here is the picture of a meeting of most of the people who were there after 10 o'clock. We usually gathered around 7 and went on and on and on. So you see a couple of the governors here, and also some people from some cities and some people from Huntsville. Now, after his visit here to Montreal, which was, as I said, very inspiring, with Guy Paul and the other governors getting together and talking and meeting with him, we went on to Bromo. Next slide, please. We had a course in Bromo. That's another tradition here in Montreal. Rajapal loves to come in the fall, and since I think 2011, where he attended a course in Bromo, which celebrated our 50th anniversary of Marshy's first visit to Canada. And it turned out he was here again this year, 3 years later, excuse me. And he came, as you can see him in the picture, to your right, and was there with the group, the meditators, the siddhas. There was a WPA, and we had the good fortune during that course, which is another tradition, to hook up with Maharaj. Maharaj took the time on Sunday, the second day of the course, to address the group. He talked about what he's doing now, and some of the things he's working on, which you'll probably hear will be published in some scientific journal. He was very, very excited about what he was doing. It said something very, very new, a bit of a departure from what he's been doing, but very, very scientific. And I think people were very, very happy just to hear his voice and the joy he had in expressing and talking about what he had. At the same time, during the connection, we had the national leader of France, Dominique Lemoine, who was also connected with Maharaj and the group here and the group in Huntsville. And he also stayed after the call and addressed all the siddhas with a lot of information about the updates of what's going on around the world, in India, and also took time to answer some very pointed questions by some of our very enthusiastic siddhas here in Montreal. And it was really, really an inspiring time. I'm not sure if you have the slide of the concert that Rajapal gave with one of our local governors. Rajapal seems to travel everywhere with his magic flute, so we made sure he had it when he came out to the course, and he gave a beautiful concert with one of the local siddhas on a crystal harp. It wasn't a siddha, it was a governor, and I think for Rajapal, it was one of the highlights of the course. I had to sit him down because he was so excited after that concert. It was just really, 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 really enchanting for everybody.
Video. va venir jouer un peu.
Un autre instrument.
Hein?
On a entendu, c'est une gamme en C que Pauline a joué. Là, ça va être une gamme pentatonique.
Thank you, John. That was a beautiful presentation. You did such a beautiful job hosting us there, and so many different elements. Rajaram's call, the talk with Dominique, Guy-Paul Gagnier's presentation, the music. Gaudry and Pauline own a crystal mine, and they make these beautiful instruments, also crystal bowls they showed us last time. Just wonderful creative governors, and they add so much to our assemblies. So thank you, John, so much for all you're doing to enlighten Quebec. We also had a webinar during our celebration in Montreal. Dr. William Sands, PhD, gave a presentation on Marshi's yoga, and everyone loved that. And then in Toronto, we had a webinar during the Sunday that we were there, and that one was given by Eugene Watts, the founder of Canadian Brass, very famous musician. And he gave a webinar on spontaneous, effortless performance. It was very, very fascinating. He played the trombone for us too. So Dr. Will Overall, please tell us more about Toronto.
So if we can go to the slide showing the office building where Toronto Centre is located. Next slide, please. That's Dr. Guy-Paul Gagné, who is giving a demonstration on the EEG and brain coherence. Again, Dr. Guy-Paul Gagné, giving everybody in Bromont. This is John. You can speak to this slide.
This is the advanced techniques. We just drove the Thakoors, who are the Indian couple who are touring Canada. We drove them yesterday to fly off out west, and this is a slide of the group that took advanced techniques.
Beautiful.
In their tour here in Montreal, they came for 3 times over the last 6 months, and we had over 30 people taking advanced techniques here in Montreal, and another 10 in Sherbrooke and Three Rivers together. A wonderful couple, and we were very, very thrilled to have them.
That's fabulous, John and Michelle. It's really great. So well done. Thank you, and thanks for everything you're doing in Montreal and Quebec. This is the picture showing the office building where we now have established, it's a year now, that we've been in the new office for the TM Center in Toronto. And we're on the 18th floor at 438 University Avenue, downtown Toronto. It's a beautiful building, a lovely and wonderful office, and the initiations have just gone through the roof. I shouldn't say it quite like that, but we've tripled the initiations in Toronto. And our whole wave now is to try, and this is one of the inside pictures of one of the areas in the center. And you can see that it's done in a very I will say in a very grand way, and trying to give a lot of quality and experience of some lush and richness to the center because of the quality of the TM program itself. It's so, such a royal program. So it's they've done the center in a very beautiful way. If we can just go back. To the last slide. So thanks. So what we're doing is expanding to increase the number of centers we have across the country. We now have established 3 centers, one in Toronto, but also in Calgary and also in Ottawa. And we're about to acquire a center in Vancouver. And I know that Montreal is working very industriously to find a new center for Montreal, and Victoria as well, which we'll hear very soon. So we're expanding as we go. We have a new center in Sherbrooke, a small office which is being run by Roger Perrinier, and that just started a couple of months ago. So we're looking to expand across the country. This is how we hope to increase initiations, by having more full-time governors and more centers. So thank you, Roger Paul. If you want to continue on the next slide.
Thank you, Will. Now we move to Vancouver Island, and we're going to hear from Peter Carr. Peter Carr is a long-term governor, dedicated, faithful long-term governor who's recently retired from Vancouver and moved to Victoria. And he is now a great leader on the island of Vancouver. He hosted us so beautifully, brought us all around, and was with us every moment. And it was just a joy to be with him and hear from him all the good progress that is going on Vancouver Island. So please, Peter, go ahead and tell us the news.
Thank you, Raja Paul. Jay Gurudev, and greetings from Vancouver Island. We enjoyed a visit from Raja Paul to Vancouver Island on October the 1st for several days. Can I have the first slide, please? He visited the Victoria School for Ideal Education, seen here in this photo, last year's 25th anniversary celebration and the inauguration of the much larger renovated building. Next slide, please. Enrollment is now up to 43 students, with a total of about 8 full-time, part-time, and special educators present at any time. The school teaches grades 1 to 8, and all the students are instructed in TM. It is delightful to see 20 or more children walking silently in single file through the neighborhood pathways on their daily walks. The neighbors think that it is very sweet. Additional land was acquired at the rear of the school, where you see the children here in the new playground. Recently, they've been planting indigenous trees and shrubs on the school grounds and in the nearby parkland spaces, working along with the neighbors. Raja Paul met with the student body in the morning and in a question and answer session. Next slide, please. Helen Foster Gomet of the Victoria TM Centre and I, and Dr. John Coig and Neil Patterson have been searching for a suitable property for Victoria Peace Palace for the last year. Rajapal viewed 5 properties that were good possibilities, ones meeting the requirements for proper vastu. That evening, at a meeting of the governors, Rajapal reviewed the progress across Canada in establishing new centres in major cities and inspired us with reports of the successes of the beginnings of a new TIA marketing program. Under the inspiration of Eileen Leroy, who was Canada's first national leader, Victoria has owned their own TM Centre building for years. We reviewed that history, parts of our strategic plan, and the progress so far in establishing a Peace Palace by searching for properties with proper vastu and by examining fundraising possibilities. At the end of the meeting, Rajapal was presented with a beautiful artwork created by Marnie Ward. Rajapal and Helen were joined by supporters at the school for a lovely Indian luncheon downtown. In the afternoon, they met with some of the teachers and school board members. See Michael and Jenica and with Rajapal and Helen there. Next slide, please. Each year, Kathleen Lapierus, our ambassador for the Brahmananda Saraswati Foundation of Canada, and Christine Clark Johnson organized a fly-in, which was held in at Kathleen's house this year. This is a social weekend for meditators, siddhas, and governors, where we gather informally for group program, dining together, touring local attractions, taking walks, and playing music. At our first evening's gathering, Rajapal recounted recent movement events around the world and told us of successes and advances in many countries. The next afternoon, we walked through Cathedral Grove, which is a protected old-growth Douglas fir forest in the middle of Vancouver Island. Can we go back to the previous slide, please? The one before that. Here, a few of us are standing before a tree more than 800 years old. It was growing before the Magna Carta was signed. This is a very peaceful place. There's so much silence among those ancient trees. Next slide, please. We then had a delightful house concert that evening, where Marty Howe and Rajapal joined in with flutes and harmonicas to accompany the evening's musicians. Raja was inspired by the day in the forest to write a poem about it and read it to us, accompanied by his flute playing. Next slide, please. The fly-ins bring the meditators together and attract people to move to the mid-island cities of Nanaimo, Parksville, and Qualicum Beach. This summer, 2 former BC governors, the Clark Johnsons, moved back and have just bought a house in Nanaimo. This area is the 3rd largest population center in the province, so we're pleased to have more governors there. Next slide, please. There's lots of natural beauty everywhere on the island. On the last day, we visited Qualicum Falls. This is a beautiful part of the island, facing the rising sun in the east, across the water. And the last slide, please. And here's the famous photo from 1963 when Maharshi gave a course at the Island Hotel on the expansive beach at Parksville. So thank you, Rajapal, for including Vancouver Island on your Canada tour and for bringing us the latest news and inspiring us to move forward quickly to achieve our goal of having a new Peace Palace in Victoria. Jay Gurudev.
Jay Gurudev, Peter, thank you. It was such a joy to be with you, and I thank you for hosting me so beautifully during the time. And I got to know the governors there, and it's just a wonderful group. You have 6 governors now in Qualicum Beach. It's extraordinary. Just up from 1 or 2 now, you have 6. And Greg and Christina Clark Johnson just returned from MUM after 18 years or more, and they're back in Qualicum Beach now and joining with Kathleen and Elliot Hinton and the governors there to form a really strong group in a beautiful center. And I was so inspired also at the school to see Fran Matkin, who's now come back to Canada from after a whole lifetime almost at Maharshi University of Management teaching at the Maharshi School there. Now at the age of 75, she's just become a teacher of Transcendental Meditation last year, and her activity at the Maharshi School is to teach Transcendental Meditation to all the children. A beautiful, beautiful way to spend one's time. And she teaches asanas. She's bounding up the stairs teaching asanas. She can do asanas better than all the kids. So it's really an inspiration to see someone who learned meditation from Maharshi back in the early 60s in Canada, and who is now just a shining light coming back to Canada after so many years and bringing a big burst of heaven to our school in Victoria. We want to now talk a little bit about Vancouver. And the next slide shows Greg and Georgina Wilson, Dr. Greg and Georgina Wilson, just graduating. Well, first we're going to show some slides of Salt Spring Island. I had a wonderful time staying with John Coig on Salt Spring Island in a beautiful Vastu house there. And Pasha Pasha, behold that beautiful beautiful illumination of life. And this is what Maharshi said, from this place, the view outside rivals the view inside. Next slide. Here's a group enjoying from the land that we own there, the beautiful view. And next slide, you can see the ocean dotted with jeweled islands. We made a lot of progress thinking how to quickly expand the course facility we have there on this beautiful land. And I really enjoyed the time with John Coig. And Don Arnie showed us the TM flying hall. We flew there, and he showed us the progress on putting a new roof on the flying hall, which is a beautiful central home for the whole community. Now we're moving on to Vancouver, and there we can see Drs. Greg and Georgina Wilson and the group that just graduated from the Center Invincibility course, New Siddhas for Canada. Beautiful, beautiful achievement. Thank you so much, Drs. Greg and Georgina Wilson, for that. This is the new center that Will Overall mentioned that they're now actually acquiring. In this building is a beautiful office that's being acquired, not only rented but actually bought, and it'll be a beautiful home for all the activities of the great governors in Toronto. We had a beautiful celebration in Toronto. Rick Van Schaik gave a similar talk to what you heard tonight about Guy Paul's brain integration presentation. And in that celebration, we heard from Alan Phillips, a governor of the Age of Enlightenment. And you can show the next slide. Alan reported to us about a great progress is being made in Canada, a great involvement of the Canadian movement in the international program to create an exhibition for the Maharshi Towers of Invincibility. You can see this brochure was made specifically for Canada, for a tower in Canada. And in Vancouver, Alan Phillips, who is the founder and director and president of Van Art's School of Media, he introduced us to some of the top leaders in animation and film from Pixar that works with Disney. And these top animators and artists met with us and gave us some beautiful inspiration, ideas, insights, and how we might make the Tower of Invincibility exhibition lively. There's a Meru team that's designing the exhibitions, and some of us came for these meetings with Alan and these experts, and we learned a lot from them about what works in terms of exhibitions. And in this brochure, you can see here there's a page on Maharshi's visits to Canada over the years, and you can see the first one is the Parksville at the top. You saw that, it was near where we were in Qualicum Beach, where Maharshi stood on the beach. And then the last slide on the bottom right, you can see in Niagara Falls, where we broke ground for the Tower of Invincibility for Canada. And it's just beautiful what ideas came out, and we've been working with these Pixar artists ever since then, and they're doing some great designs for us for the exhibition in the tower. And on the last page of the brochure, you see the plan in Niagara Falls for the Tower of Invincibility to be the center of our Maharshi Vedic village, which is coming along beautifully, and which I hope Dr. Will Overall will tell us a little bit more about now.
Gurudev, Raja, thank you. It was really fortunate to have Rajapal on his grand tour across Canada to come and stay in Niagara Falls for several days. And while he was here, he spent a lot of time planning with myself and our project leader for Niagara Falls for the Maharshi Vedic village Russ Guest, and it was Rajapal wanted to meet with all the governors, siddhas, and meditators of Niagara Falls. So we were really fortunate to have Helen DeReese organize a meeting on a moment's notice, and we met with about 15 of the local people, and it was really wonderful. Rajapal made a presentation of our plans and the tower and everything, and everybody was really enthralled and very, very excited and inspired by what could happen. And Russ Guest is working currently to find and develop partnerships that can move our project forward in a speedy way. So we're moving forward. We're doing what we can as much as we can, as fast as we can. And Rajapal, what did you feel, in terms of being here? I know that you did a grand tour, a whole day of traveling around the properties. What was your experience?
Well, Will, you and I have been looking at land all over Toronto area and Montreal area to find some beautiful places for a academy for meditation, and we found some really fantastic spots with the governors in the eastern province townships east of Montreal for a residence course facility, and we found in the area of Milton with David Shaw on the escarpment looking down over the lake, some beautiful lands where we want to have a academy of meditation and a TM center and some residences for meditators very near Toronto, a beautiful location near the metro. So we're going ahead with those projects, but when we went back to Niagara Falls, we just fell in love with it all over again. We said nothing compares to this land. It's a divine place. The feeling being near the falls is just something about it. We know why Maharishi put so much attention there. We walked around the entire land and we just fell in love with it again, and we renewed our enthusiasm with the whole group of governors there to quickly bring it to realization. I'm so glad that Russ Guest is working with potential partners now and getting very close to some arrangements that could make the project start. So let's show Will these next slides, and maybe you'd like to comment. This is a first slide in a presentation that we showed to all the governors. And the next slide shows a bird's eye view of, you can see our land at the bottom, and it's on the Welland River, a beautiful river, and you can see the tower right in the middle, which will be a central feature of the whole project. And you can see right at the top is the actual falls and plans we have for transportation system running from the falls to our property. This is one of the things that's in the works. Very exciting. And this is what the tower will look like on the property. You can see the other parts of Maharishi Veda Vision, or the Total Knowledge campus, of which the tower will be the center. And then in this last slide, you see the location right at the border of US and Canada. Just a little, you see the circle. This is where our land is on the Welland River. A very strategic location right on the Queen Elizabeth Highway where an exit is, and a perfect spot to bring Maharishi's total knowledge to the whole world in a lively, entertaining way. So Will, tell us more. Tell us about our trip to Maharishi Vedic City.
Well, that's the other aspect of your tour, Rajapal. You didn't end it just in Canada, but you actually put a kind of a switch in that we went to Fairfield, Iowa, where the pundits are located, and we were fortunate enough to be able to go and sit with the pundits while they performed a yagya. While we were there, the purpose of our trip was twofold. One was to meet with Dr. Fred Travis with Russ Guest to discuss how we can implement brainwave mapping into the actual experience of being in the tower, and that was quite exciting. And we had a very wonderful meeting. Fred's very engaged in seeing what can happen with that. And the other purpose of our trip was to meet with the Global Marketing Group. The Global Marketing Group is doing a lot of work now to how to increase the presentation of TM throughout different countries. And so we're going to be working with them to do Google AdWords across Canada. And so the idea is that we'll have a marketing team focused on that for us in Canada, with the assistance of a team down in Fairfield. And we'll be doing a test in the next month or so, and we'll see what the results are. But the whole purpose is to increase initiations across Canada. And this will be quite lively, and we'll be looking forward to seeing what the results are. And we had really good meetings when we were there, and I think you enjoyed being a part of the meetings when we're meeting with Richard Hobbs and the other team members. I think we learned a lot, and we saw the possibilities for growth that way. So that was a very successful trip to Fairfield, and then I believe you continued on and came back to Quebec after that.
Right, and we had a wonderful meeting there, Will, with all the Canadian governors too.
Absolutely, governors and siddhas and some meditators. And thank you for reminding me. They were quite interested to know what was happening in Canada, and they, one of the things I was impressed with was that they really wanted Canada to be invincible and to rise. So they were trying to help us in many ways to do everything that they could to help us achieve our goals in Canada. And many were interested in potentially coming back to Canada. Obviously, we'd love to repatriate all of our Canadians wherever they may be in the world. But most of all, we want to create coherence, and we want to have a creating coherence group in Canada where we can have our total number for invincibility for Canada as soon and as quickly as possible.
And Dr. Neil Patterson has been leading the charge to support the Vedic Pundits in the Brahmistan of India, and Canada has really led the way with this. Some very generous donors, Brad Cook and others, who have really just done such an inspiring job of supporting Ati Rudrabhishek especially, and the Vedic Pundits in general. So we commend Neil for his leadership in that area. It's fantastic. And we have a group of 26 governors who are leaving to go to India from Quebec tomorrow. And then in January, another large group from all over Canada will be going. So again, this year, Canada is holding up the flag of invincibility in the Brahmistan of India. We've been hearing, we get every few days beautiful reports that Doug Story, one of our Canadian governors, is putting together of good news in Canada, Canada in the news. And over again, on and on, year after year, Canada rising more and more in good news. And the economy is strong. The feeling of support for all the cultures of the world and accepting all the cultures of the world into its fold in Canada, not necessarily mixing the different cultures, but embracing them and having them enjoy their cultural integrity in the fabric of Canadian society. It's fantastically unique experience in Canada to see that. It's a wonderful, wonderful success of Canada. And also to be a family to all the a friend to all the nations of the world. And happiness. The happiness index that are done always have Canada right at the top. So congratulations, Dr. Will, overall, on leading Canada to such a exalted state. And thank you all who have participated today. It's been a very fun event, and we look forward to continuing our progress and completing this fulfillment of the strategic business plan that we've laid out for ourselves. And I'm sure we'll be meeting with you again on the Global Family Chat soon with more and more good news. So we end the Global Family Chat by ringing the bell of invincibility.
Heaven is descending, descending.